Laura,
I am.
do I call you like just Laura or is it therapist Laura?
Laura. Laura works.
Laura.
Yeah.
What do your clients call you?
Laura.
Mrs.
Miss
Reisman?
Reisman? No. No, definitely call me Laura. They call me Laura.
Right.
Yeah.
Soon Dr. Laura.
Soon Dr. Laura.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, I'm doctoral candidate.
Dr. Reisman.
In a few years.
In a few years. Put that in brackets. Parentheses. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm very excited that you've decided to come, not only because you focus on fertility and therefore it makes it especially relevant, but when I very first started this podcast, the only expert I even wanted on truly was someone to help with the mental health side of things, because I can give a lot of feedback and insight as to the medical side of things, both from like an Eastern and a Western standpoint. But when it comes to being in the right headspace and the mental health aspect of fertility, I'm inept. I'm not competent. And some might even say barely sane. So
well, I would say you have a ton of experience, and because of your experience, you are able to give a lot of, at least I hear it from my clients because many of them see you, right?
Yes.
So I think you give a lot of that emotional support to your clients. But yes, there is a little bit of that separation between a perinatal mental health therapist and your practice or a fertility doctor's practice. And that's why it's all about the team approach.
Why did you get into fertility specifically?
Yeah, so I was working, I've been a therapist for about 10 years. And for 8 of those years, I was doing emergency therapy. So I was doing a lot of trauma-based therapy. I was doing family and trauma-based therapy for the city of Toronto. And I was working a lot in maternal mental health without even realizing how much I was working in maternal mental health. And then as my partner and I started to explore expanding a family, we had gone through our own challenges and it was taking a little bit of while. And then we got pregnant, which was very exciting. And then what I will now call kind of that beautiful naivety of fertility came into play for me. We were almost 8 weeks plus pregnant, didn't think anything, had a lot of pain one night, knew something was up, but didn't know enough then to say, okay, what should I do? So I went to the ER. And those 12 hours at the ER changed everything for me. End of that would be that I miscarried. And that was emotional, but it was really during the time in the ER that I found there's something broken in our system. How is it that a young woman, I'll call myself young then, woman was going to the ER in pain, bleeding, and was just like shoved to the corner and left alone. And, I won't go too much into the details of that, but after the period of time, I had one nurse over those many hours who came up to me and said, I've had 3, you'll be okay. And I remember even in that moment thinking, wow, that was cold. Like that wasn't are you okay? That was this is kind of brushed under the mat and, here's what you need.
Get over it.
Get over it.
Yeah.
And the only reason I was even forced to stay was because they were thinking that potentially ectopic. And at that point, I hadn't had a ultrasound. It wasn't. And I left there, and being a therapist and also somebody who advocates fairly well, I think, for myself, I went up to the nursing station as they discharged me. And I said, I want you all to know, and maybe this was a little harsh, but I said, I want you all to know that I felt failed today. And the nurses were like, I said, I wish somebody had asked me if I was okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I called it out. I said, I just lost my baby. And nobody asked me if I was okay. Not even the doctor, which was odd. And so that was that experience. I went back to the trauma work I was doing. And I just, as I went along with our fertility treatments at that point. And happy to say, about a year later, with your help, made our beautiful daughter Peyton. But it was during that time that I thought, let me get a few more letters behind my name. So I have my master's in social work, but there's something about perinatal mental health I want to explore more. And I did that. And then I started practicing in the field and taking on more fertility clients. And then through that, started taking on a lot of pregnancy clients and postpartum.
You know, one of the things that I respect the most about you as a therapist and as a human, so I get feedback from, I don't know, I see about like 50 patients a day. So about like 250 a week. A good chunk see therapists, not enough. But the ones who I know are seeing you feel really heard. And you're not just giving them tools, you're validating. Like you're a real person. And so, I mean, everybody has their own style. I'm sure that comes, with every profession. Most acupuncturists are not off their rocker or unhinged, but I feel like most people that are seeing you, they're like, oh yeah, Laura agreed with me, or Laura validated that for me, or as opposed to just like tools. And I feel like that personal approach, even what you just said right now, like when you're like, you failed me, I lost my baby today. As someone I've had 5 miscarriages, and with all of those, at no point did I even think to really check in with myself. So, like, you almost made me the little ice queen. Like, emotional.
But I appreciate that. I think there's a lot. I practice many forms of therapy. So there is the talk therapy. And most clients who are coming to me are actually not coming to me for talk therapy. They're not referred to me for talk therapy. They know that they're coming to me because I practice a type of, similar to a cognitive behavior therapy, where we're actively looking to make change. We're looking to move forward, because the reality is that when you're in the fertility place, it is a cycle of grief. And unlike grief therapists who are working on this one grief and time healing and working on yourself to get through it, you have to get back on the horse to get back to your next round, which could be 2 weeks later. And so we work through the process of cycle of grief of, okay, you're on this up, things are feeling good, I'm having a lot of hope, and you're on this path up as you're feeling this hope. And then it's the climax of, okay, where I'm ovulating or I'm going in for IVF, here it is, and now I'm in the 2-week wait. And during that time, it's usually anxiety filled. I try to lean into the hope during that time. And then potentially, or from many of our patients and clients, there's the grief. And we have to give that grief time. We have to say, it's okay to feel this way. It's okay to say, I am sad and I'm angry. And how is it that I'm still on this racetrack and so many people have come on after me and now they're off of it and I'm still here chugging away, trying to get through, and I'm sad. But then I also say, well, what do you want to do about it? You want to move forward. You have to get back on because you still have the same goal. And the goal is to expand your family. Maybe it's not on the path that you had originally thought it was going to be, but it's on a separate path or a new path, but the goal hasn't changed. So you got to get moving forward. You don't get to get stuck in that grief place. So that's typically where I find that clients potentially feel like I hear them, because I say, yeah, it's not a happy time in your life right now. But also, what do you want to do about it?
Yeah, you're real. You're real. It's funny. I have a lot of patients where, I mean, my only context. Do you ever watch Frasier?
I loved Frasier.
You loved Frasier. Okay.
Yeah.
So Frasier, they talk about the stages of grief. It's probably wrong because it's a sitcom from the 90s and it's based off of Frasier getting fired from a job. But at the time, Niles is walking Frasier through, actually, he's walking his dad through Fraser's stages of grief. And one of the stages that he goes through is negotiating. And that is something that comes up all the time for my patients. And it's almost like they're negotiating with me, which is interesting because I can't, like, this is, getting pregnant is something that nobody has control over. And, like, not the doctor that you're seeing, not any other specialist that you're seeing, not you, nobody. And so it's interesting when people are giving me ultimatums like, and this has to be my month, or this, this round has to be successful or I'm not doing it again. And I know, and I think that deep down they know that they don't mean that, because they will then have that round. It won't go as they were hoping. Or even if it does go as planned, they're back. Like, baby, they're back. And I respect that and I appreciate it. But the negotiating, walk me through what could, if you're feeling like the need to negotiate, that's even really a stage of grief. And I'm not just pulling it from Fraser. But what does one do with that phase of grief and to help yourself? Like, is it a helpful stage?
So to me, it's all about control.
Okay.
And when in almost every other area of our life, there is control that is tangible.
Mm-hmm.
You said it. Fertility is not tangible. You do not get to say, that's the month. Maybe some people. Those are the unicorns, right?
Right.
Yeah. We don't see the unicorns.
No.
So the control piece is something that we have to then say, okay, well, what do you have control in? It is negotiation. I have to be pregnant by the end of the summer. Or when it comes to loss, well, this is when that baby's due date was. I need to be pregnant before that. Okay. And what I look at is the short-term goals. I kind of call them movable goalposts. So any of my clients who are listening to this / watching this will know that term well, because we can't create these set in stone goals. We're creating these movable goalposts that we can say, this is what I want at this time, but it's not set in stone. So, for example, instead of the idea of it has to happen next month, it's in 6 months, I'm going to reassess where I'm at. And when I reassess where I'm at, that might be pivoting my path. So potentially not going to the clinic anymore. That might mean potentially looking at fertility alternatives like egg donor, sperm donor, embryo donor. That might mean trying a different practitioner, accessing a new clinic. So it's these longer term, what do I want? What I want in the next 6 months is to get pregnant. But if it doesn't happen, it's not, okay, the 6-month mark has come and it's a failure. It's in 6 months on this date, I'm going to reassess. As long as the goal hasn't changed. And similar to what you said, when the client's like, I'm one more time, that this is it.
Yeah.
To me, until one of my clients says to me, I'm done, it's official, now help me process that. We've decided, or I've decided, that I'm no longer going to try to get pregnant. I'm no longer going to try to expand my family. Now I'm going to process that grief, and I'm going to process the idea of what my life will look like without that. Until that day comes, which has happened in the years of practice I've had, that's not even a discussion. What is one more time? Well, one more time is this time, this way. And if that's the case, then in a month, we adapt.
How do they prepare for that adaptation ahead of time?
I think setting themselves up for success would be just reminding what the goal is. And if that goal, the big goal of, I know I want to expand my family, is it, then it's just living in that. And living in the unknown and living in the lack of control is not comfortable. So we just acknowledge it.
Right.
You cannot say next month is it. You can't. Unless there's like physical reasons or financial reasons where you know this is the last time. It's not possible to go on.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, after this time, I'm going to need time to process and see if I need a break.
Yeah.
You can't plan for the unknown, or else you're going to create 100 different plans and then fail. I know. What? Type A personalities.
Laura, I plan for the unknown pretty much constantly.
And how many plans do you have on the go right now?
Way too many.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling very ungrounded.
After this, we'll talk.
This is really just a therapy session for me. And I managed to get it on film, which is, who wouldn't dream of that?
Yeah. I think one of the things that is really important is when we plan, we're putting a lot of energy into that. We're not to say we're not living, but if you're planning for the unknown, you are putting so much energy into each of those plans that if 10 of those plans don't come to fruition, you've spent so much energy on them. And that energy, I'm sure any of our patients and clients would tell us, fertility is a full-time job to begin with. Why are we expending so much more energy on a dozen different plans that aren't at our fingertips right now?
No, I mean, absolutely.
Easier said than done.
It's not even that it's like a movable goal or like a tangible plan, or it's that because everything is so flexible and unknown, finding those little buoys in the water to sort of navigate your journey is so crucial. So do you make in terms of like, just to break down, so you would say it's important to have like flexible goals, but you only focus on the things that you can absolutely control one at a time as much as possible.
As much as possible. I would say that that we look short term. So within this week, what do I need to do? Regain some of the control. Because we know so much of it is out of our control. So regain some of the control. So what do I have to do this week? What is in my control? I can control taking my supplements. I can control showing up to my doctor's appointment. I can control moving my body, eating well, not being so stringent and tight on those boundaries, but doing things that I feel good about and I know are in my hands.
Right.
I cannot control the outcome of what my lining is. I cannot control the outcome of how many eggs are retrieved. I cannot control what the outcome of the embryos are. I can control everything that is in my hands. So medication taking, communication with our partners. I can control asking for what I need. I can control advocating for myself to my clinic. I think that if I've learned anything over the years of practice, if you do not advocate for yourself, nobody else really is. And that you can have the best doctor in the world, but that best doctor has multiple patients. And unless your file is in front of them, you may not be at the forefront of their mind. And there are mess ups. We know this. Some medications are given when they shouldn't be given. Sometimes a file, your day one comes and you accidentally don't get a call back. Things happen. So the best advice I can give any of my clients is part of your control is to advocate for yourself.
Yeah. I think a lot of them feel like fertility is then their full-time job, which is exhausting. And that's something I hear a lot about is, that they're paying for it. Like, I'm paying for this. Thus, it should be better than what I would receive from our public system. And I think that's the case. That should be the case. There should be like a concierge for patients and that they shouldn't have to necessarily like constantly advocate for themselves. But I totally see what you're saying with regards to regaining control that way. I love that you said that it was important not to be like super stringent about the lifestyle piece, because something in terms of the negotiation piece again that I run into a lot is the need to be perfect. Like, okay, and then because everything has to be perfect, they get exhausted. Like it's too much, it's too taxing for too long to maintain this streak of perfection. Like, I'm only gonna eat organic. I'm only gonna have, my food out of glass. I'm gonna throw out all of the makeup in my drawers that has any chemicals in it. I'm going to, move my body, but only in a way where my heart rate gets up to this point. And in doing so, it's becomes this like impossible lifestyle that they need to take a break from. And then it makes that journey that much longer. So if you've been at it for like 2+ years of being perfect, I can't even imagine,
Mhm.
it makes it that much more of a loss. And they feel like they've lost on life,
Yeah.
even when they're doing things that are good for them.
Any extreme
Yes.
is not good. Any extreme is not good. Short periods of time bursts, fine. If there's a goal and you're like, I need to get through the next couple weeks and I am going to wake up at this time and do this thing because there's an examination at the end of it and bursts, fine, acceptable. But any type of extremes is just not healthy because then what it does is it sets you up for failure. Because when you have that one slip, which is human, you decide to go out for that pizza night with a girlfriend, you have one bite of that pizza, it's going to feel like a grief and that you've destroyed all the work you've done. And that isn't what any part of life should be like. You should be able to feel what you're giving to yourself is not only grace, but you are setting yourself up for success. I fully believe in seeing you as somebody who did see you, right? To take the supplements and to try to be the best version of yourself within that boundary of, okay, I also want to live and I want that pizza once in a while, or I want that, I really love that lip gloss and I don't want to throw it out. But it is, you have to keep living as you're in this process. You have to, because everyone else around you, and this kind of goes back to what you can do to help yourself, is that there's a lot of grief and guilt and resentment that comes in this time of our clients' lives. And everyone else around you is living. And then that resentment grows because you're going to those baby showers, or you're seeing those baby showers, or, you're seeing your friends who are going out and having these drink fest nights and pizza and beer nights, and you want to be a part of them, but you're not allowing yourself to be a part of them.
Yeah.
And there is that balance. I want you to feel good about what you're putting into your body and feel good about the control piece you have without letting it also take over your entire life.
No. Yeah. No, that's so important because that's something I hear all the time. People will be like, oh, my friend just announced that she's pregnant and she drinks wine every night and she doesn't do acupuncture and she tried like one time. And here I am on like, month 8. I've done a round of IVF. I'm stuck seeing you, Anne, every Friday. Now I can't even have toast and coffee. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you from the perspective of like comparison, but I feel like it's really hard right now, especially with like social media, but also like certain communities are really tight. Like I know a lot of my girlfriends went to the same high school as me, and they all sort of are going through life stages at the same time. And so when you're left behind, with fertility, for example, that probably adds to that like sense of grief.
Even in the fertility piece, because you make a community within this community. And I've been seeing this a lot more so recently over the last, I would say, year, where clients feel, well, my best friend was in it with me, or my friend who then became a best friend was in it with me, and we were both struggling. Guess what? Somebody at one point is going to get off the track. And then you feel left behind, even though this person was in the trenches with you and they were going through it with you and you had a space and a friend to talk to about these things. And then, well, now they're pregnant. And there's a lot of grief in that. The person that you felt safest with, who wasn't your partner, who wasn't one of your practitioners, is now off the track before you. And I kind of talk about the dual emotions of life, which is to hold your own grief and the things you want, and yet at the same time celebrate others is so hard. So hard. And how do you do it? Well, sometimes you have to compartmentalize.
How do you do that?
You decide for yourself. We'll use a baby shower as an example because it's usually one that comes up a lot.
Okay.
You decide for yourself, can I go? That's the first step. Can I go? What does that look like if I go? Well, I'm scared I'm going to cry the entire time. Well, maybe this isn't the baby shower for you. Okay. That's fine. If you have to say, I love you so much, here is a gift. I hope you have the most wonderful day. I appreciate you understanding where I'm at right now. That takes nothing away from the beautiful celebration that I feel for you. Okay. Sometimes those conversations have to be had. Other times it's really not a choice. It's your best friend. It's your sister. It's somebody that you're incredibly close to. You know that in a few years you will regret not going. Then what you do is you set a time for yourself and you say, I'm going to go. If I'm triggered, I'm going to graciously leave. I'm going to tell myself I will process these feelings later. And how you tell yourself that is literally you suck them back up inside yourself and you say, I'm giving myself time later. I'm not going to burst out into tears here. I'm going to think about this when I get in the car. I'm going to think about this tonight. I'm going to talk to my partner about it. I'm going to call my therapist. Okay. And that is when we process those feelings. But when I'm in the moment, you talk yourself down, but you also don't diminish. You're not pushing them down and not giving yourself the space to think about it. You're just saying, not now. These 30 minutes I'm here is not now.
Right. So repression in small doses with the intention of release later is okay.
Is okay, but you have to do the release. You have to find time for the release. It's not possible, especially with the primarily women. I do a lot of couples work, but the women I work with, you don't get a chance to lose it at work. You don't get to be an ER doctor or a surgeon and just break out into tears over your fertility. That is not happening. So we talk about ways that you say to yourself, I'm going to think about this later. I just got triggered. I'm giving that its space and time, but now is not the time to release it.
How would you recommend going about if you're a deeply repressed person, hypothetically?
Hypothetically.
How would you go about releasing that? Because I'll use myself as an example. I have had 5 miscarriages. I actively was miscarrying at one point while I was treating a patient, helping her to induce labor.
Mm-hmm.
She was also a friend, still is a friend, but at the time I didn't want to diminish or take away from what she was so excited for, but was having to excuse myself because I was passing huge amounts of blood at that time. But I didn't at any point, I think, think back to it to release it. It just was like, okay, this is really shitty. I'm going to keep going. And then, it's not necessarily that I've forgotten about it, but something I stress a lot about. Don't worry, I won't release on this podcast right now.
Bring it on.
Could you imagine? I just had a complete...
And that's the end of the podcast.
That's the end. We're going now. Laura's going to teach me how to release. But at no point did I worry a lot, especially there's a lot of books now, a lot of literature about the impact of feelings being, repressed, held in your body for long periods of time. There's one book called The Body Keeps Score. Is that right? And I worry that sometime later in life, I'm going to have some sort of physical manifestation of all of this repression. So now I've segued us back to me, and away from the topic at hand. But I do worry about, how does one, do you write it down? How do you make a mental note that, I felt really awful about this. And I wasn't okay, but I've gotten so used to doing this now.
In the way you just said it, which is that everyone's processing is going to be different. So it's giving the time. Our bodies do hold stress. We do hold tactile memories. So for some of my clients, it's like the idea of going back to the hospital that they miscarried at brings up those feelings. They may have not thought about their loss in years potentially.
Right.
And then they have to go back for a general appointment for nothing to do with fertility, or they're visiting someone, and all of a sudden this flood of emotions comes up. So all I can say is that if on the day you were feeling that way and you repress, you consciously repress. So in that moment, you knew, I'm here to treat this patient. This is not the time. This is a me thing. I could step away from this patient. I could bring them into it, but that wasn't a choice in the moment. So you continue doing what you were doing. You were the practitioner. You compartmentalized. And what I would have asked you at that time is that night, when you got home to a safe space, and safe space could be alone in your car. Safe space could be when you don't have the distractions of life. So multiple children running around.
Right.
And Matthews.
Yep.
When you have the safe space to say, oh man, that was tough. That was really tough. How am I feeling about it? And then you give yourself, it's okay to not cry. It's okay to not have a screaming match. It's okay to write it down. For some people, that's their way of expressing the emotions behind it, maybe journaling. That also doesn't have to be the way. I have a lot of clients who hate writing, and I'm not much of a writer, so I understand that. You give it space and time. You schedule yourself 30 minutes. And if in that 30 minutes, nothing really comes out, but you've sat there and you've thought about it, that is a way of processing.
Right.
If you question yourself in that and you feel there's something I'm not processing here, then you might want to explore it again.
Right.
But that might just be it.
Do I have to journal then?
When you try to explore it again?
Yeah.
If it makes you feel better?
No,
then don't do it.
I see all these Instagrammers. They're waking
starting
up,
their day with the writing.
They're smudging themselves.
Yeah.
They're drinking copious amounts of water, and then they are writing God knows what.
Essays.
But it looks very serious.
If it makes you feel good,
yes,
and you are feeling that you are more centered by doing this ritual of sort, then you lean into it. If it feels completely unnatural, I always say you try something a few times to see if maybe it's just getting into it that is the unnatural feeling. But if you know yourself and that's not part of your process, then you tried it. It doesn't work for you. You try something different.
Could working out be it?
Working out could definitely be it.
So you could think about it and then do a workout.
You can think about it while working out.
And then you're done.
If it feels like you're done.
Right.
You're going to hate the answers here because everyone here is so different.
Yes.
So the way you process it, when you run, that actually might be a way that your brain empties itself.
That would explain a lot.
It could. Yeah. It's a way that the endorphins are getting through you. It's your Zen time. If you are running and you are making all the lists of all the things you have to do, then it may not be the most relaxing, but at least your body's moving.
And that's a method of processing.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Do a lot of people, when they come to see you, do they say, I'm coming for a specific reason? Or do they say, I probably should do this? Because I feel like a lot of my patients say to me, do you know a good therapist? Because I feel like I should probably start seeing one. And I'm like, yes, I do. And yes, you do.
And then she's like, sorry, I have no space. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, it often, I would actually more so specify that when I'm seeing couples, or I will gender point here. When I'm seeing men, it's, well, my partner told me I should see someone, or I have to see someone. Often enough, people are coming to me because they're not feeling good about where they're at on how they're balancing life right now. So the fertility piece, they want to talk about it. They don't feel great talking to their spouse or their friends or even their doctors about it, because it's also, when you talk about hard things, you are putting it on someone else. So you're paying to put it on me, right? You're not, I get to close my computer at the end. I have a beautiful way of compartmentalizing my clients, and I get to say goodbye and then see them the next time they come in. when you can put it on someone else and they're coming from a neutral standing, they don't have anything to do with your life, it can feel good. And usually when people are at the lowest points of not just their fertility path, but life in general, it's actually not when I'm seeing them. It's either right when they've come out of that lowest point and things are terrible still, or right as they're heading into it.
What tools do you equip them with generally? What's your top tool? I'm going to Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins, if you notice that she gives like numerical,
What's number one?
what's like 3 ways to do this, 2 ways to get your life together, 1 way that's going to change your life. And I'm like eagerly like, play.
Like, I need all of them.
Change
Thank
my
you.
life, Mel Robbins. So what is your 3 ways? There's no 3 like tree, like energy tree. I'm trying to like see the branding.
I see the play.
Do you like that, Ryan? Yeah. Ryan's the main guy behind trying to make me somewhat organized and produce this in a professional capacity. Thank you for that.
As he writes down the 3 ways.
Yeah. What are my 3 ways for helping balance life and fertility as sort of the partner in a fertility journey that's sort of leading the charge, if you will?
Communication is number 1, because communication, big, broad spectrum here. You cannot get what you're not asking for. Okay. So when you need something better from your partner, but you expect them to read your mind over what you need, that's not part of the Laura rules in therapy. You have to say, this is what I need. This is how I'm feeling right now. So we talk about the love languages and all of that fun, but communicating what you actually want and need, that also leans into communicating with your clinic, communicating with your practitioners, saying, this is how I'm feeling right now. Feeling really unsettled in this way. Or can you tell me a little bit more about why you made that decision? And it might be in your clinic changed up one of your medications. Ask, what was the reasoning behind that? So communication to me would be number 1.
Okay.
Let's see. Number 2.
Yes.
Number 2, just self check-ins. It's been a really hard month. Where am I at? How do I feel I'm balancing aspects of my life right now? I kind of talk to my clients about what I consider a pie. I don't think there's, and I should talk to you about this, I don't think there's a possibility of doing over 100%. I think when we put focus into one area, all we've done is drawn from other areas, and that's not a bad thing. But at times we have to put back in. And so if you've drawn from your relationship because you've been really focused on just the fertility piece for 6 months, you're going to have to take a little bit of that focus and say, we need to get back on track. I am going to put some time into sitting down next to you and cuddling up with you, or, going on a date night. If you've pulled from your friends, you might want to schedule that time to get together with people. If you pulled from your work, absolutely, you might hear that from your boss, right? And you might have to refocus some of that energy into that. So check in. Feeling good about what you're giving yourself. So if it feels good to go to your acupuncturist, then you do that. If it feels like you are eating well and enjoying some of that 20, I think you talk about the 80-20, right? And you're bringing some of that 20 in, then you're doing it. You also have to do a lot of self-care during this time.
Right.
And it's not just about the control, but it's how do I also just enjoy life day by day? So that would be my 3rd.
Adding in sprinklings of enjoyable activities.
Yep. When you're not in the midst of either the climax, so you're showing up you're ovulating or you're going into clinic and you were in the 2-week wait or the 2-week window pre, that's when a little bit of sprinkle is good. Give yourself that flexibility a little bit to say, what can I do for myself this week that would feel really nice? Maybe it's just that after work walk. Maybe it's something a little nicer like a massage.
When you say that you're pulling from your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
In fertility, I feel like that's particularly interesting because if you're in a heterosexual relationship, kind of need part of their, contribution, if you will. So when you're pulling away from your partner for like 20, 4 days of the month and then being forced to be intimate with them for another 4, what kind of toll does that create?
So much of a toll.
I mean, from
There's
like a perspective of like, is it mostly the male that suffers in that? Because I
would
feel
say
like I
it's
would be fine to
yeah.
tap out.
I think many women would say the same thing. It is a toll in general on the couple because what you're doing, there's nothing, I've said it before, there's nothing sexy about timed intercourse. You can make intercourse sexy, but there's nothing sexy about the concept of timed intercourse. And when when we look at emotional intimacy and physical intimacy, I like to separate the two. Emotional intimacy, you can sprinkle in over the course of the day. How are you doing? I miss you today. Thanks so much for that coffee. It brightened up my day. Can't wait to see you tonight. These are emotional intimacy.
You fake it until you make it.
Sometimes you have to.
Like I love my husband, but I would never think ever to text him that I missed him.
So it wouldn't be
Most of the time I forget I'm married.
That's my husband. He's like, where are you going right now? I'm like, I've got work to do. Don't mind me. I've got mine on. Okay. So the emotional intimacy, it's less about the faking it, but what makes my partner feel seen? What makes me feel seen? So this goes back to that communication piece. How do I know that my partner sees me and what I need? And maybe that is just saying, hey, I think you've had a hard day today, or do you want to tell me about that? Maybe it's sitting on the couch and, having your partner just tickle your arm. Maybe that's something you need and you want to ask for it. So similarly, I'd like couples to tell me, what is it individually that you feel you need from your partner? What's your love language as a sense? And some of those things as the emotional intimacy can come from, how are you doing? I'm thinking about you. Or at the end of the day, physical touch. Then there's the separation of that and sexual intimacy. And it's okay to really not be in the mood when you're in fertility treatments. It's also, by the way, for anybody postpartum, also very normal to not feel in the mood. And part of it is what's going to get you to that place. If you were just in that couple days of the timed intimacy, what can you do to make those days a little bit more interesting? A little less, this is a time, this is a place, and it's the same every month. So you sprinkle in a little extra excitement to make it a little bit different, to connect in different ways, or you just recognize that is the task at hand. And throughout the rest of the month, we're going to try to connect in other ways.
What are some of these sprinklings of excitement that won't get someone fired?
That won't get someone fired. Or me not invited on a podcast ever again.
I wouldn't know. You can't give me your best shot, Laura.
I would say changing up routine can be very, very nice. We've got a lot of, wives' tales over positions and legs up and all the things that you want to do for fertility. But changing up where you are, maybe in your house, maybe, and this is a privileged answer here, but maybe you get a hotel room, maybe you change it up and you make those couple days a little extra special. And if it is just at home, maybe you do something a little bit different at home. Maybe you just ask your partner, maybe you go into it a little bit more with the intimacy side and you have a date that night or that day, and you just spend a little bit more time together connecting to take a little bit of the clinical out of it.
Right.
But also, guess what? Fertility treatments, if you are in it for a long time, there is going to be clinical. And it's also accepting that this is a task we are doing to get to a goal. And that doesn't mean that that is our only form of emotional or physical intimacy. And if it is, then you reach out to a therapist who specializes in intimacy and you try to bring that back into your relationship.
What if one partner, I had a new patient today, who she's pretty young. She hasn't been married for that long, but she has no libido. Looking at her hormone panel, there's no physical reason that that should be the case. I can relate. Most definitely. Like, if you told me I never had to have sex again, I think I'd be okay, provided I could watch Frasier and eat mangoes.
Ooh, very specific. At the
Yeah.
same time,
Oh my God.
that's an exciting night.
That is the excitement I need. And it has nothing to do with my husband. Like, he's great.
Mhm.
But I know that that resonates with a lot of my patients as well. So what if that's the case? What if it has nothing to do with the person you're with or even the circumstance? You just have like no libido.
Mhm. So a couple things. One, if a patient like that came into my office and we were talking, I would explore the pre. So pre-fertility treatments, pre even marriage, what was your libido like? Are we looking at a significant drop off at a period of time? Are we looking at, well, look, when you're with a partner for an extended period of time, the excitement drops off a little bit in that area as well, or a lot?
Right.
And you're not driven towards it as much? Is it something that you are still excitable about in other areas? So if you see somebody good looking or somebody that you're attracted to, you feel a little bit of a spark? Or is it just, no, I could live without it? And if it is on the I can live without it, then I explore, and this is an area that I'm very cautious about talking about because I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression here.
Right.
So I'm saying that, and if you're one of those people, please don't.
Safe space. Don't worry.
Safe space. Sometimes sex and intimacy can be seen as a task-oriented activity.
Yes.
So I have a rule around that. If it hurts you physically or emotional, off the table. Please go speak to your doctor, maybe see a pelvic floor therapist. There are things that you can do.
Right.
If it's not one of those two things, then if you are in the moment and you enjoy it, then it's just more of the buildup. And it's the fact that you may need time and being in the moment to enjoy the moment. I will often hear from people, I could totally live without having sex with my partner again. Then we do it and I'm like, that was nice. That's nice. Why don't we do that more often? So if you're one of those individuals, then you can think about this as task-oriented. And similarly, in tasks, you would want your partner to be doing things for you that are things that you enjoy. And it's okay to be in a relationship that one person may have a much stronger driven sex drive and another partner doesn't. It's okay to be in that position. But if it is really important for your partner, and again, it doesn't fall into the category of pain or emotionally discomfort for other reasons, then it's okay to say, I'm leaning into this because I know it's important to my partner.
Right.
What are they leaning into it to me that's important for me?
Doing the dishes. Finishing the tiling.
You're going
the
to
front door.
Make your husband listen to this podcast.
Finishing painting the green wall. Very non-specific.
Very
tasks.
non-specific. Totally non-specific.
But what does that make me? I'm like some sort of gigolo. I'm like, I will have sex with you provided you finish tiling the floor.
This is why I don't want it to get misconstrued. And there'd be a lot of comments on the bottom of this, which is that we are not trading sex for tasks.
I would do it. I would.
Your household, your rules. Your household, your rules.
Honestly. Like my one mentor, she's thebomb.com. She's in New York. Jill Blakeway, she's an amazing acupuncturist. She wrote a book, Sex Again, and it's specific because she sees fertility patients exclusively as well. And she's trying to bring the sexy back into fertility. I got through 2 pages of that book and I love her, and I devoured her other books on energy medicine because I was like, okay, I've got chi stagnation, no problem. I can treat that. And then sure, yeah, it does improve things for like a little bit, but not as much as tiling the floor would.
There is a lot of self-work that can be done, and that is reconnecting with your own intimacy. And I will do that work, which is, how do you feel connected to yourself from a sexual perspective? That is separate from if this is something that my partner really wants and there are things that I want too, how do we make it part of our relationship that this is something we give to each other in different ways? That is excluding the fact that there is work that you can be done on an individual perspective to reconnect with your intimacy, your sexual intimacy.
Right. Like, I've been postpartum many a time. I'm sure a lot of people would fall into that category as well in terms of not ever reconnecting after the age of 19 to potentially, which PS is not when I was postpartum, but from there onwards, it was like, okay, I'm busy. Like, I'm so busy.
This goes back to the pie that we talked about when we pull from
Right.
different areas and you're putting so much of your focus into other areas of your life, that piece gets pulled back
Right.
and pulled back and becomes less of a focus. And at times in life, that's fine. When you're going through fertility treatments, you're just trying to get through. You're trying to maintain potentially your job, maintain friendships, family, yourself. That if sex as pleasure is not at top of mind, that's okay. It
As long
might need
as
to be
you-
a discussion with your partner.
Right,
And
communication.
keep them. Number one.
Number one, communication. Yeah, that's fair. Like, expectations are being set and then met at the forefront.
Sometimes when a couple comes in, we will actually take sex off the table to reconnect intimately. It might mean because one person might be drawing back from rubbing that person's back or bringing them something because the other person thinks it's their in. It's, they're giving me the signs. So sometimes we actually take it fully off the table just to reconnect intimately and emotionally as a couple.
Right.
And then we bring it back in.
That's so interesting. So, in a fertility setting, you completely remove it.
Can. We'll have a lot of partners who are angry about this. It's in a technique of like behavior therapy. We call it kind of the ladder approach, which is basically how do we reach comfort levels, but adding on and adding on. So if you actually think about a ladder, what's the bottom? We haven't connected in months other than this timed intimacy. So what's something I want more of? Well, I want to sit on the couch cuddled up next to you. And that might be the bottom ring of the ladder. Are we doing that? Again, sex is number 10. That's not on the table right now. We're not at that ring. So number 1 is just connecting intimately. And it might be, I feel really good when my partner rubs my back while we're watching TV. And we've brought that back in because number 10 is off the table.
Right.
What's number 2? Well, we want to connect intimately. So maybe that's exploring ourselves independently. Maybe that's exploring together, but again, sex not on the table. There's a bunch of different rings. Maybe I don't need to go through it on the podcast.
I really enjoyed the. Okay. I'm intrigued.
Good. And then once the ring is met, meaning both partners are comfortable at that stage, whether one would have been comfortable no matter what, doesn't really matter. It's a person who's not comfortable. Then we add on and we add on. We know what the goal is. The goal is to feel connected intimately, potentially at the sex level. And it's about how do you get there? So it's not going from 0 to 10. There are a lot of steps in between.
Well, that's important. It's interesting because I've had a lot of patients who have actually opted for like IUIs and even IVF in order to avoid ring number 10 because it's become just too much. Like it's really like it's the expectations and the tasking and it's ruining their relationship essentially.
There are couples that decide together, maybe it's based on time, that it naturally happened, or maybe it was a discussion where just doesn't happen. But if you are feeling disconnected from your partner and it's something you want, then we work on it.
Interesting. Do you ever have couples that will come in knowing that they have to be disconnected for a certain amount of time, like be it that they have jobs or they've got school or they have kids, with the intention of then reconnecting at another point? Or is it sort of like...
If both are on the same page.
Right.
If they're not on the same page, then it's something that needs to be discussed and worked on. If both are on the same page, life is crazy busy right now. We are just making it through. If we can be intimate with one another once a month, good for us. Okay. If you are on the same page as your partner, wonderful. If you're not, then it is something that needs to be discussed and worked on. And sometimes it is a give and take. Somebody has to say, okay, I know this is important. So task oriented, like we talked about. And for the other, it's right now is not a time. I'm dealing with a lot. And this is the last thing I'm thinking about. And that might not make you feel good. So we need to talk about how that doesn't make you feel good, but maybe in other ways, how I can make you feel good.
Have you ever consciously uncoupled anyone? Like Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris
One
Martin?
couple. I will say that. Not, obviously, never purposely.
Yeah.
But I think that usually I can't do that to a couple.
No.
I cannot
helps them through.
I cannot make a couple not be together. But absolutely, I think that there have been, I purposely don't work in high conflict couples anymore because I did trauma and high conflict work for 8 years. And I can choose what I do, and that's not what I do. But I happen to have, a few patients and clients that are in the position right now of when they started seeing me really not connecting. And it being pretty clear that unless you're both willing to do the work, one person can't fight for something that's not there.
And is the work mostly communication?
Yeah. And getting your needs met. And needs being met. The needs might need to be adapted to make them reasonable to meet.
Right. Like not painting an entire bottom floor, for example.
If you would like me to say he has to do that, I will say it. I'll say it on camera.
Poor man. Yeah. Don't worry, I won't uncouple from you.
And
but I do. Drop. I honest to God. When I said on another podcast once, she said, "What was the best decision you ever made?" And I said, "Getting divorced." And that was from my first marriage. Yeah. Don't worry, this isn't my announcing that I'm getting divorced.
He has to paint the basement.
That's right. Or else. But it was fun, like the level of discomfort that host had with that. She was like, "Are you sure you want to say that?" I was like, "Yeah, I mean it."
By the way, you won't make me uncomfortable saying that because I find that our lives are chapters. And just like fertility, so full circle. When we think about this time in our life, this is your thing. Like as a patient or a client coming in who's going through this is a phase. This is a chapter. This might be a really long chapter, might be years, could be short, could be a couple months. But this is a chapter. And at a certain point, you move forward from this chapter. And the same thing when it comes to uncoupling or divorce. At a certain point, there was love that brought people together. And sometimes that changes. And it's okay to say that was a chapter of my life. You can be very happy about it being over. Yeah. You can be sad about it. You can hold both emotions at the same time. But it was a chapter and you move forward from it. There's nothing uncomfortable about it. That was part of your life.
Just part of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't like a bitterness, like it just didn't work anymore. And it was it's interesting because I feel like now I'm a little older than you, but I feel like a lot of my friends now are starting to enter in that phase of potentially not remaining with the same person that they originally started with or started their fertility journey with. And I think it's important that we're a lot more open about it and that it's thought of in terms of chapters as opposed to like a failure.
My husband hates when I say this, which is, I feel very blessed to be in the relationship I'm in. He also married a therapist, poor guy.
He knew what he was into.
Actually, he didn't. I was a teacher then, but it's fine. I was an early child educator then. But many years.
That's such a good combo.
It works for me.
It's teaching.
Yeah, it works for me.
It's all teaching.
So I do say, I'm like, we feel blessed to be where we're at now. And I hope this remains. I hope this remains because we actively work on it. We work on it every day. And we love each other a lot. So that combo is pretty strong. But it's also the reality that people change, circumstances change. Life happens sometimes. Loss, grief. And that can make people see things in different ways, or people can just grow apart. And it's okay to say, that was a chapter and I'm moving forward. And hopefully it's not filled with so much anger that you're blinded by that for periods of time, but you just move forward from it. And you hope to find joy and love and support again.
Because you can.
Because you can.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Laura.
Yeah.
That was wonderful.
I love talking to you.
Honestly, I really thank you so much for coming on. Not only did you help everybody who's going to listen to this, you gave tangible ways. I'm practically Mel Robbins. And I feel like you've helped me, especially with that, validation that it's okay to compartmentalize and move through difficult emotions and feelings at a completely independent time from when you're initially triggered, because I feel like that's something I deal with almost every day on a very different level. And I think most of the people who are listening to this podcast will say the same. So thank you
Thanks for having me.
so much.